Make every night a wonderful journey, no matter where you are. Good night, sweet dreams. The first story, Valentine's Day. This was a collaboration between Dylan KLJ and Deny the Truth. Valentine's Day, 1998. I remember that day when I asked you to be my Valentine. That special bond that I felt was going on between us was increasing, and I wanted to take that to the next level. I remember the look on your face, the happiness and excitement of the day we spent together drained from your face like water running down a plug hole. You said no. I loved you. You know I did. So why would you do this to me? Why? I remember when you walked away into the crowd of lovers. I sat on the bench crying. I walked home on my own. No one was at home to comfort me after what you did. I remember waking up and looking at the patterns of my cuts from last night. The blood on the carpet was still there from last night. The writing on my bedroom walls was still there. Why? The writing said, all written in blood. I remember 2 weeks later, I saw you on the street with another man much younger and better looking than me. The pain just grew and grew. Everything we had done together had just been thrown away by you. Every time we fucked, you told me that you loved me and me only. I remember when I walked down that alley, and that gang of thugs mugged me and killed me. I died thinking of you, as the knife plunged into my chest, and in my life with pain in my heart, as the knife dug deeper into me. I could feel the life slipping away. The sheer pain was excruciating. I remember at my funeral, my friends and family were there. My mother was crying. My father was comforting her. I looked around, but couldn't find you anywhere. When I died, it wasn't nice. All I could feel was searing pain through my body, as if I was on fire. The pain was excruciating, and I only escaped because I didn't feel complete. I felt I needed something more, and I knew what it was. It was revenge. I don't know how I escaped, but it involved lots of pain. When I got back to Earth, I felt like going straight home to say hey to everyone and say I survived. Then I realized no one could see me, so I just decided to kill the thugs that took away my life. I could still move things, but I was invisible. It was great fun, and I enjoyed it so much. The first one I went for ended up face down on the ground with a cracked skull and no scalp. He never knew what hit him. I used the same knife he used to kill me, to carve his pretty little eyes out of their sockets. By this time, the 2 other assholes had backed into a corner. I ripped the first one's fingers off with my teeth. After that I cut his eyes out, holding them in the same hand as the others. I knew what I was going to use them for. I was going to make a necklace for you, with the second shuddering in pain on the floor and the third in tears. I felt the rush and became even more violent. I cracked his jaw at the first uppercut and dislodged his head from his body with the second, and as with the others, I cut his eyes out with the same knife and kept the eyes and knife for later use. I knew where I had to go next. I was going to his house, the one who took you from me. I was going to be less forgiving to him. When I first saw him, he knew something was wrong. He could sense me getting closer. I knocked him out with a single punch to the neck, taking out his airway and suffocating him till he collapsed. After that, I surgically cut a hole in his throat so he could breathe. I wanted this to last for as long as possible. He choked up blood and started to wake on the verge of death. It appeared he could see me. He knew who I was. But you were dead, he stuttered. He was so wrong. I cut his eyes out with him still screaming, then plunged the knife deep into his stomach. watching his intestines pour out onto the cold carpet floor. At least I think it was cold. It was too drenched in blood for me to tell. I felt better after this, but still not complete. I was still missing something. It was you. I needed you. I would never be complete without you. So I set off for your house, whistling to myself along the way. I was happy for some reason. I knew nothing could stop me now. As I drew closer, I felt happier and happier. You were surprised to see me. You cried and I told you not to. You wouldn't stop and I tied you up. I got angry. I shouted. I cut you. I put the necklace I made for you on and you just screamed louder. I plunged the murder weapon that was used on me into your eye, and from then on we were tied together in a permanent bond. No one would separate us. I was happy now. I could finally rest. The second story, dark past. My grandmother was an American woman, living in Russia. At the time Joseph Stalin had taken over after the power struggle following Vladimir Lenin's death. When Joseph, Man of Steel, came to power, she attempted to flee the country, but the love for the kids she thought she was a teacher kept her. Eventually some of the kids started disappearing, and she realized they were leaving the country. She began to pack her things and head for the train that led into Europe. As she boarded it, she saw many other passengers. Some were full with joy of leaving. Others had no emotion. After the train pulled out of the station, several passengers stood up and took out the standard Russian gun, the M14. A Russian commander also entered. He pointed to a young man who was shot on the spot. He pointed to a mother and her child. The mother was stabbed and the baby thrown off the train. Some passengers began running whom were mostly shocked. My grandmother hid under a table and waited for the men to pass. As the Russian soldiers passed, a pair of boots stopped. She looked up to see a young man staring at her. When she thought he would shoot her in the head and end her life, he walked off to his fellow soldiers. As she sighed in relief and got off the train into the police station. As she got off the train, she noticed she was the only one off. And then she saw it, a pair of eyes staring at her through the train. She didn't know why, but she began to run. She heard guns go off behind her and was almost killed. If it wasn't for a Polish officer who returned fire, she would have been killed. As she thanked the Pole, she realized he was the same man from the train. Questioning this, he told her he had an identical twin brother whom left for Russia to become a baker. He also told her they were sympathizers for foreigners in communist states. As my grandmother continued to live in Poland, she woke up to machine gun fire one day in 1939. As she kept up with the news, she realized Germany had invaded Poland. Her reaction was quick to leave this time and flew to the neutral country of Greece. As she lived in Greece for a year, the Italian invasion dragged the Greeks into the hell of a war, as she called it. As her herder was broken down by a Greek soldier, she was ordered to come with him. As she turned left and right, she saw the Italians being slaughtered. The Italians had poor equipment, poor tactics, and poor morale, while the Greeks had high of all these things. She tells me every time I ask her, she was put in a civilian center. She could still hear the fight going on. Flash forward for years. She had survived the occupation of Greece and had helped the Red Cross bring food to the starving Greeks and aid to the wounded resistance. As the war ended with Hitler's supposed suicide, she moved back to the U.S. Flash forward 50 years. She was in New Jersey, her home state, when she spotted 3 immigrants, a Pole, Russian, and Greek. To this day, she swears that these 3 were the Russian soldier who kept her secret. the Polish officer whom helped her, and the Greek officer who escorted her to safety. The third story, diseased. It has existed since man could understand the concept of pain. It has existed since man could suffer. Many ancient cultures have very diverse myths about the creation of the world, life and human purpose. The concept of disease, however, always seems to be pinned on malevolent spirits or demons. The Nosoi, the Gul and the Mongol Baron are a few examples. As time carried on, these were dismissed as silly tales from primitive cultures. However, that only allowed for it to move more freely. If people aren't looking for it, how could it be inhibited? Usually with spirits or gods, they wither and die if they are forgotten. This creature is quite the opposite. It fares better if no one is looking. It delights in our attempts to control its handiwork. The creature has changed vastly over the course of its existence. The form it chooses changes on a whim, depending on how it feels like terrorizing the population. Sometimes it appears as a human skeleton, sometimes it wears a mask. Like the plague doctors of old, it has been known to take the form of animals. Sometimes just the bones, however. The appearance it chooses doesn't matter. The only ones who ever see it are usually artists, or the mentally unstable. No one believes them. It will only show itself to those who it deems worthy. Pray you are never deemed worthy. It is not only the origin of disease, but also its guardian. It creates pandemics for fun, letting them loose upon the world, laughing at the hysteria and panic it creates. It ensures that disease is never stopped. It helps them mutate, resist vaccines, and grow stronger. Do you know how many diseases have actually been cured? 1. Smallpox. This nasty creature is behind most of history's greatest pandemics. The bubonic plague. It was yellow fever. It was AIDS. That one was actually the US government. But you can bet the creature wiped a tear of joy from its eye and smiled, proud of how humanity has learned from its techniques. So, while modern medicine does everything it can to keep the creature at bay, while not even acknowledging it, it smiles and continues to turn the natural wheel of mortality. The more diseases we try to fix, the more it will rain upon us. There is only one way to be born, yet over 1,000 to die, and now you know the reason.